Hello and welcome to Freestyling Friday. I'm Emma Morton-Turner and today we're tackling one of the most common questions, one of the trickiest things I ever get asked. How much should I charge as a freelance interior stylist? It's a big question and honestly, there's no one size fits all answer. In fact, legally, I can't even tell you what to charge. It's called price fixing and it's a big no-no. If you've never heard of it, it basically means that if a group of people come together and set a fee across an industry, that is price fixing, and it creates an unfair market dominance. So if I tell you what to charge, it will create an unfair advantage, and that's what's illegal. So that's why I can't talk about it. So if I can't tell you what to charge, what can I do? Well, I can help you figure it out for yourself. So today I'm walking you through the key questions you need to ask yourself to confidently set your own rate as a freelance stylist. And if you're a freelancer in another industry, it will probably be relative to you too. So how do you determine your freelance styling rate? So the first thing to think about is how much experience you have. Have you been an assistant on shoots? Have you been sourcing props? Do you know how to work behind the scenes? Are you ready to take the lead, maybe for the first or second time? And if you've put in the time and effort to know the ropes, you should be charging accordingly. Whatever you do, don't start too low. It's almost impossible to raise your rates later on once you've been working with a client, almost impossible. So think about what kind of work you've done. Think about the kind of experience you have that will shape your value. So maybe you've worked on editorial shoots. Maybe you've done a lot of product launches. Maybe social media campaigns are your thing. Maybe you do TV commercials. Maybe you do TV advertising. There are so many different types of styling, and lots of them have different fees, different fee structures, and also they have different levels of expertise, and that's going to be reflected in your fee. Now, when you want to know the going rate, obviously you can't ask me. I run Inside Stylists. That means I will be kind of creating, what did I call it in the beginning? The market share. I will be creating a level playing field, and that's what's price fixing, and I can't do that. So I personally can't share what I think you should be charging. But you can ask other stylists. You can ask your friends. You can reach out to stylists you've worked with, friends you might have. I was asked this week this question because someone had gone from being an in-house stylist to being a freelance stylist. So when you're PAYE and your salary just gets paid straight into your bank account, you know what your annual salary is. But going from working in-house for someone to freelance is a very different world. And that is when I would ask other stylists who are doing similar work. This stylist is going to be working on commercial shoots. So I would find stylists who are doing commercial shoots and ask them. They can tell you, or even if they can't tell you a roundabout specific figure, they can give you a ballpark figure, because sometimes you just need an idea. And people, especially in England, we're a bit funny about talking about money. You might want to say, whereabouts are you between this amount and that amount? Am I close? And just be a little bit kind of vague. But let me tell you a quick story. So I remember when I was about to go freelance, I was doing a shoot, one of my very last shoots when I was home editor at Women at Home. And I was telling the photographer about kind of getting my first job lined up as a freelancer. And I was literally talking about this very subject. I wasn't quite sure what to charge. And this photographer, who had just done a freelance shoot, told me what the stylist on his last shoot did, his freelance stylist, charged. And I nearly fell off my chair. I was like, for one day? They charged that for one day? And now looking back, I completely understand why. Because when you're freelance, you're going to charge more than what your daily rate would be if you averaged it out as an interior stylist working on a magazine. Your day rate would be very different compared to a freelancer's, because there's other things to consider when you're freelance. But that number that really shocked me back then, which, let's face it, it was 14 years ago now, that is way in my rearview mirror now. I've got so much more experience. I've got increased value, and my rate has gone up a number of times since then. But it's very interesting to think about what it is that the costs involved with being an interior stylist. So, for example, when you're running your own business, you need to think about the time that you're going to be shooting. You are going to be doing, you're probably not going to be shooting every day. You're probably not going to be shooting every week. There may be quiet times. Let's face it, there will definitely be quiet times. There's always quiet times. And those quiet times are the ones where we think, I am never going to work again. No one will ever book me. And then you have other times where you're like, I don't know if I've got time to wash my hair. I'm so busy. There are always times like that. But what you need to think about is when you set your day rate, there's plenty of behind the scenes costs that are involved. And they're the things that I hadn't factored in when I very first went freelance. And now I understand that these needs, these financial needs need to be met. So now I've been freelance for 14 years or so. I know that I'm going to be using props from home. I know I'm going to need to replace those. So sometimes they'll be factored into shoots. Maybe I'm bringing some white china for a client and I've got my own things. Some stylists will charge for that. I don't. I tend to just bring things from home. It makes my life easier. If I know I've got a set of cutlery and I've got white china and wine glasses and gin glasses and all those things from previous shoots, I will always bring those with. And I will want to replace those. Personally, finding these at treasure hunting, boot sales and antique fairs is one of my favourite things to do. So it's not a problem. But that has to come from somewhere. The money for that has to come somewhere. So always think about if you're going to be buying specific props, if you're going to need to replace props, keep that in mind. You might also find you've got so many props, you need storage. You might have storage for props. You might have an office space you need to rent. Maybe you don't have anywhere to work at home, or you just find working outside of the home is a better option for you. I spend quite a lot of time working in coffee shops. Some people will go to places like WeWork, sign up to a membership to one of those working spaces. These are other things to think about. Now, transport, when it comes to shoots, is usually covered by the client. You will normally have your travel card covered, or your petrol and your parking will be covered. But there's other things to think about. For example, the cost of running a car. It is not cheap to run a car, especially now with ULEZ and congestion and all of those sorts of things. And I personally think, I do know stylists who work without a car. I don't know how they do it. I love to just jump in my car and pick up something from Facebook Marketplace or from eBay and go off to different places. You fill up your propping bag with tons and tons of stuff from TK Maxx, and you thank God you've got a car so you don't have to carry it all home on a bus. So I don't know how people do propping without a car, but some people do it. But if you aren't, the cost of or the costs involved in charging your client for using your car, most people have like a fee that we will, I mean, it's been the same for years. It's something like 45p a mile, and that covers your petrol, but it also is a little bit extra to cover your insurance and your wear and tear on your car. But the rest of the time you're using your car, you still need to pay for those things. So that is another running cost that you need to think about. The other things are things like, have you got a website? Do you have a portfolio set up? Are you a member of Inside Stylists? Do you want to pay for social media ads? Maybe you're having some cards built. Maybe you want some branding done. I know a lot of people have had really amazing signatures put on their emails, and they're designed by proper designers. I would say graphic designers, but I don't think they're called graphic designers anymore. So maybe you want branding done, and I love it when people pay out for branding, and it just makes them look so professional. Also hosting to have your own, like my email address is emma@emmamortonturner.com. That's not free. I have to pay for that. So things like that need to be factored into the costs of being freelance. Of course, there's also the dreaded admin and the tax accountant. There's going to be a lot of time involved in doing that. You need to make sure you've got that covered. Maybe you're paying for a accountancy package like Xero or Free Agent. By the way, if you have a metal bank account in the UK, you can get use of Free Agent for free. I don't know if you know that. It's been brilliant. I did this last year, and I love metal. I absolutely love it. Metal, I'll put all this in the show notes, but metal is spelled METTLE. Just go check that out. So you don't have that cost if you have a metal account. You don't have to pay for Free Agent. But that is another thing to keep in mind. And these are things you really need to think about and make sure that when you're charging, you're covering enough bases to make sure that when you're paid and you set your day rate, you are going to have profit after all these expenses. So what are you actually charging for? Your fee isn't just for showing up on the day. It covers your expertise, it covers your prep work, it covers your overheads, your tax, your profit margin. You need to make sure you are factoring all of these expenses in. Otherwise, you could just end up earning less than minimum wage. I think that happens a lot. It is a conversation I've had with many stylists. The hours we put into our job minimum wage is probably very common, and it's very sad because we're very passionate about what we do and we love the creative work we're in, but the hours involved to get the perfect shot, the minimum wage thing is bound to be there. I'm just going to turn a blind eye to it. I'm not going to look. The other thing to think about is, what's your annual goal? Instead of thinking about jobs individually, step back and look at your yearly target. How much do you want to earn? How many days do you work on average? And you can do this by looking back at previous years and seeing how many days you've worked in the past. And from that, you can kind of work out a very loose, kind of calculated day rate. So how do you talk about the money? How do you talk about how much you charge for your services? So I've talked about this quite a few times. I've done another podcast completely separately to this one about having a rate card. I think most creatives don't like talking about money. It makes us feel a bit icky. So we tend to want to share it in an email. And having a one-line email saying my day rate is X pounds a day, it's just not going to share what it is that you do. So I like to share everything on my rate card. So I will share things like, I will share and lay out my rate card so that you can see my experience. You can see the services I can provide. You can see my past clients. Obviously, my pricing is in there. I add a few things in there about what I charge for travel, what I charge for assistance, things like I won't buy props until the props advance is in, the budget is sent over to me. It's very professional. It's very clear. And it makes it much, much smoother to tell people what it is that I am charging. So I'm just going to give a very brief description of what should be included in a rate card. So the types of services you offer, it's really good to include a list of the kind of things you've done. So have you done commercial shoots, editorial shoots? Maybe you do live events, press launches, dinners. Maybe you do private homes. Maybe you do TV. Maybe you do books. There could be a whole host of things you do. And you never know if this person who's looking at your rate card and looking to book you to do a commercial shoot in 3, 6, 12 months, may be doing a book and may need a stylist for that. So by sharing everything that you do on your rate card, you're promoting yourself, and it's really good for branding. It's good to share a list of who you've worked for, whether that's editorially or commercially. Include what you're charging, obviously, and lots of contact details so people know how they can get hold of you. So a few things to avoid. We don't work for free. I've said this quite a lot. We will do a little bit of work experience when we're very, very new, because it's very difficult to get paid work when you haven't got any experience at all. But working for free is not what we do, because exposure, which is what most people say, it'll be great exposure, come and work for us for free. It doesn't pay our bills. The only exception is when you're brand new, but otherwise we don't do that. Charging too little is another thing people do often at the beginning, and it's almost impossible to raise your rates later on. I did mention this earlier, but I remember I did completely off topic, but I did a flour making workshop, like a sugar paste for cakes, with Peggy Portion. Peggy Portion is a very well-known cake designer, and she's got shops in Belgravia and all over the place. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful cakes. And I have a cake blog on the side, and gosh, this is like 10 years ago. She did a workshop, and on this workshop, she was saying that you never, ever charge what you think you're worth as a beginner. You never say, well, I've only been doing this a little while, I'll only charge a little bit now, because I'm not going to charge what proper stylists do, because I'm not there yet. But if you start really low, you will never get your fee up. It also really impacts the rest of the market, because if you're charging like a few £100 and someone else is charging 1,000, that is bringing the market right down. And actually the service you're providing is the same service. It's just not as an experienced service, but you're still providing the same service. So don't start too low. Don't think I'll raise my rates later. Whatever you think is where I'd say, go to a place that makes you a little uncomfortable and put a little bit extra on and charge that. Another thing people do that isn't a good idea is keeping their price the same forever. Your skills will improve as you go on. Your experience will grow, and your fee should grow at the same time. I'll tell you another quick story. I I know an interiors influencer, and I met her many, many years ago. And she started off by charging £75 to do an Instagram post for a brand. And every time another brand approached her, she would put it up again by £25. And she just kept adding £25 onto her fee until someone kind of gave her a pushback and said, nope, that's too much. And she'd come back down and she'd sit at that level for a little while until she felt that she had improved and she was getting more reach, more followers. So she would push it up again. So now, let me just say, she started at £75. There's a good few extra zeros on her fee now. So I always keep that in mind. And it's something that I quite often will tell people. Wherever you start, you can always start with your first few clients and then raise your fee for the next client and raise your fee for the next client. And every time you get a new client, you can raise your fee and you can go up in small increments of £25 or £50 or £100 until you're at a point where you feel you're at a level where top interior stylists are. Obviously, you're going to have to chat to interior stylists and find out what fees they are charging. Should you charge differently for shoot days and prep days? Some stylists charge less for prep days, assuming that they require less work. Personally, I think prep days are twice as much work as styling days. Styling days, you've done all the work. You've got everything together. You've done all the schlepping around the shops and getting all the prop hires and making sure you got the flowers and the food and everything, pulling everything together and all the phone calls. I think the prep days are way more hard work than when you turn up to a shoot and everything's ready and you just style. And that's the great bit. That's the fun bit. That's where you get to be super, super creative and do the job you've been hired to do. But some people do still charge a little less for their prep days. I don't. I charge the same, but it's completely up to you. I have to say that charging the same makes pricing so much easier for everybody. The client and yourself, you know exactly what the boundaries are within that shoot. So putting your pricing into action isn't just about setting your freelance rate. It's not just about picking a number. It's about understanding that you have worth, that your value and your experience are really, really important. You're running a business here. So know your value and charge accordingly. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Have you struggled with setting your rates? Have you put your rates up and not had a problem? Have you put your rates up and have had a problem? I would love to hear what you have to say. So do leave a message on this video if you're watching the video, on the podcast if you're listening to the podcast, and let me know what you think. I hope it's been helpful and answered the question to the stylist who messaged me this question this week. See you next time for more Freestyling Friday tips.